Hi, I'm Karen Sino, and I'm here today with Kathy Greenfetter, Carolyn Gibbs, and Jean Jochum. We're all authors with Secret Cravens Publishing. Today we're going to share with you our secrets, advice for inspiring authors, and some information about the publishing world. Secret Cravings is an e-publisher, paperback publisher. They just got finished celebrating their second anniversary with publisher Beth Walker. My experience with Secret Cravens has been phenomenal. They have a wonderful marketing and promotional team, and being an author with them is like being part of a family. Today, our program is going to be a question and answer session where we're going to be able to give everybody a sense of the writing experience. Kathy, you want to tell us where you live?
Yes, I live in Nutley, New Jersey, and originally from Staten Island, but we moved to Nutley. We've been there over 20 years.
I live in Staten Island. I was born in Brooklyn, moved out to Staten Island in 1972, where I'm still a resident. Carolyn?
I currently live in New York City, in Manhattan, and I've only lived there for a couple of years, though. I recently moved there from Queens, where I lived for years and years.
Jean?
I live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan and have lived there for, seems like, absolutely forever.
Okay. Being a part of writing, there's different genres. We have historical, we have Regency, paranormal, contemporary, women's fiction. Kathy, why don't you tell us about the genre you write, and why did you pick that particular genre?
I write primarily paranormal romance, and but I have written historical Western romance, and I'm currently doing young adult romance. I like writing paranormal romance because the paranormal interests me, and I actually got interested probably because growing up I heard a lot of ghost stories, and that interested me in writing ghost stories, and also I enjoyed a lot of books dealing with paranormal elements, so I decided to try writing them.
I write women's fiction, and my books basically take place on Staten Island. They have a musical theme. There's musicians in both the books. And I picked that genre because I love living in the present, and I like to discuss situations that happen in everyday life. Carolyn?
Hi. I write mostly women's fiction and contemporary romance, and I think I picked romance because I worked in the news industry for so long, and I like happy endings. So that's why I like romance, because there's usually a happy ending, or at least a happy for now.
Jean?
I write contemporary romance, and like Karen, I kind of like to be in the here and now, writing about what I know about today. It doesn't require as much research as it would, like Kathy's Western historical, requires a lot of research. But I write about New York City, and I write about small towns, and I like to invent towns and people, but in today's world where my characters deal with today's problems.
Okay. Now, another thing that I find interesting is, when you read articles and see TV shows where they interview, some authors, always wonder, where do they write, and when do they have time to write when they're putting out so many books, 3, 4, 5, 6 books a year? Like, how do you find time to write, and where are they writing it? Are they in an office? Are they in a basement? So, Kathy, why don't you tell us where and when you write?
Okay. I'm a full-time middle school teacher, so I have to write when I can, and usually that's on the weekends. I write weeknights. I write in the summertime. But I started writing originally when I wrote my Western. I wrote that on the bus going to work. I actually was commuting. And yeah, so basically it's when I can.
I try and write mostly in the morning. When I was younger, I used to stay up late at night, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, tapping on that Smith Corona, and my mother yelling from upstairs to cut it out and go to bed. But now, 30 years later, I usually write in the morning. I do my creating in the morning. At night, I do my editing. And 9 times out of 10, I'm writing at my kitchen table. And in the summertime, you'll find me down at South Beach on the beach, and I'll be doing writing and editing there. Carolyn?
I do most of my writing in the morning and in the afternoon. I usually write in my room, at my desk, just in the house. I have tried, taking my computer out and going to a coffee shop, like it, looks chic. Oh, go to a coffee shop and write. And it's just too distracting. I really can't do it. I get too involved in other people's conversations, or it just, something is interfering with me. So I just like to stay at home and do my work.
Jean?
I like to be at my computer at 6 o'clock in the morning when New York City is quiet. I'm sitting on a desk in a little corner by myself because I need, like Carolyn, I really need to have peace and quiet when I'm writing. I write full time, so I start at 6 and I write until I can't stand to write anymore. Or it's 7 p.m., whichever comes first. But I also find that when I'm out places, if I'm waiting or something, my mind is always going. So sometimes I'm writing on the back of an envelope when I'm waiting at the hairdresser or sitting on the bus or doing something else in life, because it seems as if the story ideas never really stop. The writing is kind of a constant thought process, even if you're not putting it on the computer.
And I can relate to that because when I go walking on the boardwalk, I usually have an index card in my hands, my hair in a ponytail with the pen sticking out of the back. So when you get that inspiration, you just have something to, jot it down real quick before you lose your thought. So there's other ways. Everybody writes differently. Some people write an outline to plot. Some people just sit down and just take off with it. Kathy, are you a plotter or are you a pantser?
I think I'm a little bit of both. It depends on the story, but I know that I've done outlines, I've done sketches. When I did NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, and I pretty much just wrote and wrote and wrote for the month of November. And as thoughts came, I just wrote, kind of free writing. But I kind of go back and forth between being the pantser and the plotter, but I like to just be a little spontaneous.
I myself, as a plotter, usually I have, by the time I'm finished a novel, I have about a 30, 40-page outline. And for myself, I feel that without an outline, I kind of drift off. So when I finish a chapter, I start I outline the next chapter. I've tried doing it, being a pantser, just sitting there and just typing. I did it for NaNoWriMo, but it just didn't work. I just kind of sizzled out. So for me, having a plot, having something solid to go by, I feel I can accomplish more writing in a day. Carolyn?
Oh, I think I'm probably a combination of the two. When I'm just starting a project, I start out outlining it and plotting and developing the characters and the setting. But then once I get into a scene, I like to kind of go with the flow of the story and see what develops. And that's how I usually like to do it. Yeah.
Jean?
I'm sort of the same as you are. I like to start with an outline. I call it a sequence of scenes, kind of a loose outline. I need to have the storyline plotted out so that there are no holes and everything is tied up and flows logically. But once I get into writing it, I find that sometimes my characters take over and the story goes off in a slightly different direction than I would have imagined. Something new happens, a new person appears that I hadn't planned on. And I really love that when that takes over. It's kind of the fun part of writing because you're as much a reader as you are a writer during those processes. And that's kind of what writing is really all about, getting somewhere else and just like getting on a roller coaster and allowing it to take you for the ride.
And as you're on that ride, even with an outline, sometimes you just sit there and just stare at an empty screen. Nothing's coming. You have your outline next to you, and you're like, well, I don't know. And then your mind just goes blank. And that's what us authors we call writer's block. So Kathy, How do you handle authors, writer's block when you're in the middle of writing a novel?
I think for me, if I'm stuck, usually there's something that I have to work through with the storyline, and I'm wondering what I have to do. And I find just getting away from it for a little while, putting it aside, maybe going for a walk with my dog, or actually doing something else. Oftentimes for me, ideas will come like I'm in the shower, or taking the dog for a walk, and it sort of works itself out. Or even in dreams, sometimes an idea for the story will come. It doesn't happen all the time while I'm sitting there working on it.
For me, even with an outline, sometimes I have a problem and my mind goes blank, even though it's sitting there. And for me, the way I work through it, because I won't move on to the next scene until I finish that scene. I'm really anal about that stuff. And what I do is, I'm a walker. I go out, I walk around the neighborhood, put on my iPod, just listen to music, clear my mind, and then come down home, sit back down, and I would have to say 98% of the time, I'm able to continue on with the plot line that I had the problem with. Carolyn?
Oh, well, that's good. Yes. I find that usually for myself, when I get writer's block, it's because I don't know something about my story. So I have to go back in and see where it's losing, with the characters and the plot, like something isn't melding properly. And one of the things that I like to do is I go and I make a list with a yellow pad, and I ask myself 20, what do I know, 20 things about the story that I know, and I write those things down, whether it's about the plot or the setting or something, and that usually gets me going again.
Jean?
I find that it happens almost with every book in the middle of the book. I don't know what it is about the middle of the book, but somehow I lose interest. You kind of bottom out. And at that point, I need to get up. I need to take my pug Homer out for a walk. He's my muse. Sometimes I talk to him about my story, or we just walk in Central Park. I go to a movie. I read a book. Something happens in the middle, and I just need to get away for a little while. And then once I'm away a little, I can look back at the story and say, oh, yes, this is what I need to do. And I can get excited about it, and I come back to it, and I'm able to finish. But it's almost always right in the middle of the book. There's that just kind of lull time when it's just time to take a break.
Okay. Next thing is, when you go into bookstores, some authors are multi-published, like a Stephen King, a Janet Ivanovich, Jackie Collins, Nora Roberts, for example. And you say, where do they find these ideas? Like, how do they come up with all these ideas and characters and plots? So, Kathy, why don't you tell us where you get your ideas for writing your stories?
Okay. It's interesting because I think sometimes life itself gives you the ideas. I always believe in observing what's happening around me, even if it's like what people, are doing, in a store, for instance. You get snippets of conversation. I know for my book, Sacred Fires, that actually came from my own travel to Mexico. So I was thinking about the experience I had there many years ago with feeling like I had lived there before. Mm-hmm. So this idea of déjà vu came to me, and soulmates came to me. So ideas happen that way from experience. Sometimes hearing other stories, sometimes from movies. Movies are a good source. And I take notes on things, and sometimes from dreams, things happen.
Well, for me, my first book, Roses, started out as a dream. I dreamt of the plot, and I just took off with it from there. But as far as my other books that I've written, they take place in real time. Most of my ideas are come from the boardwalk, because I am a board walker. I walk South Beach, Midland Beach every day, and I come across multiple characters on my walk, and I take the people and I try to incorporate them in the book. So to me, real life characters, and real life settings is where I get my ideas from. Carolyn?
Okay. Well, I get my ideas from several places. Past experience, of course, and with that, you always have to change your names and places so people don't recognize themselves or whatnot. You get sued. But anyway, that's another story. But and then also the news. I was in the news business a long time ago, and I still am a big news junkie, and I get a lot of ideas from shows like the Today Show or even local news. Some stories just lend themselves to fiction. So.
Jean?
My first book, Now and Forever 1, a love story, which is the first in the Now and Forever series, the characters just landed in my head out of nowhere. I just woke up one morning and Mac and Callie were sitting there in the kitchen with me, and I wrote their story. But usually what happens, a story happens to me when I see a situation or I think about something and I say to myself, what if? So for The Blind Love, which is the third book in the series, what if a man who was a very, very attractive man and always got women based on his looks, what if he became attracted to a woman who was temporarily blind? And the one thing that always got him success with women was the way he looked, and the woman he wanted was a woman who couldn't see him. And that just gave birth to an entire story, which became a book. So what if becomes something that I use often when I see a situation. Well, geez, what if this were to happen or that were to happen? And then a book is born.
And then when that book is born, and sometimes those characters, you know, they just take over you. They take over your life. They take over your writing. And what started one way goes into a different way. Takes like that little fork in the road. So, Kathy, has any of your characters taken over for you?
Yes, I think sometimes when I start the story, I have like this preconceived idea of what's going to happen, and I start writing the story. And I get in what I call the zone, where I really get into this other world. And suddenly, the characters they're real for me. They're like my friends. And I think of them, and I think of what they're trying to tell me. And I've sometimes started the story, and then somewhere along the way, it's like they're saying, no, don't go this way, go that way. And I do that. So I've tried to listen more in the creative process to what characters are telling me than forcing something that I don't think fits. So basically, yeah.
Well, for me, in my Mystical Wonder series, it was supposed to be about four women, their lives and their relationships, but one of the male characters just took over the book. I don't know what happened. It was just like he just ran away with my book, and from the way I originally wanted the book to end, it wound up going from one book into 4 books. So yes, my characters take off. They go on they get down on that paper and they just run out there on me. How about you, Carolyn?
Oh, yes, I would say the same thing actually, that sometimes characters change once you're in the middle of the writing. Project that I'm working on right now, my main character, as I'm working more with her, she's developing more of a background, and I can see things that have happened to her in the past, and that's affecting how she's feeling now.
Jean?
It happens to me all the time, and I find things appear on the computer screen that I didn't even expect. I had one character who was going to shoot another character, and she was just going to wound him, and what appeared on the page was she shot him until he stopped moving. And she killed him, and I had not expected her to kill him, but she did. And of course, as it always happens with the character, that was absolutely the right thing to do. She had to kill him. It was the only safe way to protect her son, and it made a lot of sense. And that happens all the time. The book I'm working on now, the older sister just called the younger sister Pokey. And I said, where did that come from? And that is a nickname that the younger sister has always hated, that the older sister had when they were kids. And I had not planned that. I had not thought about it, but it just appeared. And I think it's one of the really fun, enjoyable times about being a writer is when that happens to you, because it's like a movie screen in your head. I find I'm listening to my characters and I'm watching them and I'm writing them down like almost like a stenographer. And when they take over and the movie shifts gears and shows you a picture you didn't even expect, it's a very exciting kind of adventure. It's a real connection with your subconscious mind in a certain way that you don't connect any other time. So I really enjoy that part about writing.
Well, once the books are all written, then once the whole creative process and the characters take over, now comes the hard part, the editing part. So Kathy, why don't you tell us how your editing process goes
Okay.
and what works best for you.
All right, I have a critique group that I belonged to for a couple of years, so oftentimes I do a very rough draft or outline, and I share with them what I'm working on, and they'll give me feedback, and they're pretty good with the feedback, so that helps me a lot in that stage. And then I have a very good publisher that we all have, who has been very helpful with the editing and so give me a lot of constructive feedback. And sometimes I find, depends on what stage I'm at, I just have to put it aside for a little while and then go back to it.
Yes.
Because that really, sometimes it just requires that to go back with a more objective view.
Well, for me, I edit as I go along. When I finish, whatever I write the day before I start the next day, I go back and I read through it and I edit that. And as Kathy says, our editors at Secret Cravings Publishing are absolutely awesome. I've learned so much from them. And now as I am writing, they have this, these 5 words that just keep on creeping into our novels: the that's, the ands, the it's, the was, the just, the thens. And now through our editors at Secret Cravings, now I find myself, as I am writing, I am watching for those words, and I'll go, oh damn, I used that again. Let me reword it, or was. And as far as, my editing, I need to be alone. I need no distractions. I need my beach. And if I'm not, with the winter, you can't go down to the beach. I usually go upstairs at my little desk in my bedroom in complete quiet to do my editing. Carolyn?
Oh, well, I think for me what works is after I finish a draft, like what Kathy said too before, that I put the manuscript away for a little while and just let it cool off so I can just look at it again with fresh eyes, and then I go through it and really read it at first just to make sure that it makes sense and that everything is flowing through and that a reader would believe it. And then I go in and check for the language, like Karen mentioned, the words that repeat, the repeating words, and that the grammar is correct and all, and then send it out to the editor, and then the real fun begins when you get it back. And that's when the real chopping starts.
Jean?
I do very much the same in that I put it aside and let it cool after I finish the first draft. But I also do like Karen says, in order to get into my story the next day, I go back a couple of 5 or 10 pages and I read through there, and it's impossible for me to read that without editing it if there's something that needs changing. I also find that I have certain weaknesses, so I try when I go back to edit to see if I can find where I need to have better transitions, or I've actually done the find thing in Word for the word feel or felt. And if my character is saying, I felt this, that, or the other, I'll go and I'll find that, and I'll realize that's telling, not showing, and I will go back and rework that little area to take out the word felt and make it a more active sentence. So the editing process on my own is extensive, and then it goes to my publisher, and it gets edited by a professional editor and comes back, and then I have a lot more changes to do. But that's great, because I learn a lot about my writing, and I learn how to fix things that are wrong. Unfortunately, then I always end up making new mistakes, but at least I'm fixing the old mistakes.
Okay, now the next thing is paperback books and e-books. And it seems to be a toss-up when you speak to other authors and readers what they prefer. So, Kathy, what do you prefer as an author and as a reader?
I'd say as a reader, I enjoy both. I like to have the feel of the book in my hands. Growing up, I love to go to the library. I love the smell of books. I love the smell of the library. I was constantly in the library as a child. So I definitely come from that background. I also enjoy the portability of the ebooks, the fact that I can load so many books on an ebook reader. And when I travel, I have that. It's just nice to have. It's easy to carry around. Then I used to carry like 10 books in my suitcase, and of course they charge you extra for that now. So, and as a writer, I could go either way. I like having my books in print, and I also like having the ebooks because, I think it gets out there.
For myself, I like as Kathy would say, the portability of, reading off of a Kindle or an iPad. But depending, I guess if someone asked me paperback or ebook, I would say paperback. I love just going, before I go to bed at night, sitting down with a book, holding it in my hands. And I don't know, there's nothing like holding a book in your hands. Even though all the modern technology and saving trees and going green, I totally am with that. But books, I'm a book junkie. I have like 5 bookcases in my living room. So I have to say, if someone said paperback or ebook, I would say paperback. Carolyn?
Well, I like both actually. I have a Kindle, and I also read a lot on my phone with the app. Actually, I've read entire books on my phone. Believe it or not. It's not that small, but it's still, reading on a phone is funny. But I enjoy both. As a writer, though, I do love books, and I've always loved the library, like you said, Kathy, too, and going to bookstores. I love to, browse through bookstores. I could stay there for hours. So I would say books, really. Yeah.
Jean?
I like both also. I love to be able to I have a Nook, so I can take 100 books with me just by taking them on a Nook. So if I get tired of one book and want to read something else, it's very easy to switch. But I'm, of course, kind of old-fashioned in the way I love to hold a book in my hand. I love the bookstore and the library to pick a book up out of the shelf, to thumb through something. I think reference books should never go out of style because you can learn so much just when you're looking through a reference book for one thing, you learn something from something else. So I love to hold a book in my hand, to curl up with a book, but ebooks are not only convenient, the one thing I really like about them is that the lower price means that you can reach a wider audience with ebooks than you could if a paperback costs $14 and an ebook costs $5. You can reach a lot more people for $5, and I kind of like that.
Okay. Well, here's something, Kathy. If someone says to you, I will give you a ticket to go any place in the world to create the perfect setting, characters, and plot for another novel, where would that be?
Okay, that's kind of a tough question. I've been setting my books lately more closer to home. Actually have, like Angels Among Us, it's set in Nutley, New Jersey, where I live. And Sacred Fires has both, starts off with New York City and Staten Island, and it ends up in Mexico. And, I've also had stories set in the American West, and I have family out in Oklahoma, so that always is an influence. But I also, being part Irish, I love Ireland, and I've been there a few times, so I've, I like Ireland a lot, and I've tried to set stories there. And England is another place.
Well, for me, in Roses, it takes place in Staten Island in Acapulco, Mexico. The boardwalk is taking place, of course, in Staten Island. But if someone asked me, would send me anywhere, I would go to Italy because that's my heritage. I would love to go backpack, no expensive hotels, backpack. I would definitely go to Rome, to the Vatican, but what I would really love is to go into Venice and go down those little canals and the shopping and the cobblestone streets in Sicily. I mean, to me, that would be the perfect setting. Besides, to me, the perfect setting is writing a setting in Staten Island because I love being here. But if someone was paying for a trip, I would be going to Italy. Carolyn?
Well, that's a tough question. There's a lot of places that I would like to go to and all. One place that I really love in the country here is the New England area. I love the New England area, like Maine and New Hampshire and all. But, you know, you have the wonderful mountains with the beach right there and all, which I find lovely. So I would say that area, probably Maine.
Jean?
Well, I actually did write a book about one of my favorite places, Love, Lost and Found. Takes place in the beginning in the Caribbean, which is a favorite place of mine, St. Thomas. I've been to Costa Rica, which I really loved, and I think that the Caribbean is a very romantic place. There's something there about the air and the palm trees and the beach and the slower lifestyle. It's just kind of a peaceful, romantic place to have a book. If I were to pick another very romantic setting, I would love to go back to Paris and have a book happen there, because I think that's also another extremely romantic location. But remembering trips to the Caribbean and using the feelings and all the senses things, remembering how the sand felt because it's crushed coral, and how clear the water is, something that we don't have up here. You can stand neck high and see your feet. Was wonderful to be able to incorporate that in the book. I really enjoyed it. And I think that setting and going someplace, being someplace, and just absorbing it right through your pores, through every sense, means that you could really write a wonderful romance book there.
Okay. Kathy, what advice would you give to an aspiring author?
Okay, I'm going to give you some words that were given to me and that I actually have by my desk at home, and that's do it anyway. Through many years of trial and error and learning the craft, I found that I had to continue to write, you know, so to never get discouraged, to keep on writing, to work on your craft, to sort of let things happen too, because sometimes, you know, things would come up, as we talked about the characters in the head, kind of, I feel characters do speak to me, so I've learned to just pay attention to that. And to keep a notebook around. I have notebooks around the house and in my car for those moments of inspiration.
Well, my advice would be to an aspiring writers is don't give up. I've been writing since I was 14. I was submitting since I was 20, 21. I have rejection letters that I can actually wallpaper my bedroom with. And the one thing that kept me going was an advice I got from one of my college professors, and she said, no matter what you do, just keep writing. And I've written a lot of books, and I sent them out. They got rejected. I rewrote them, but all I can say is just keep writing, get a critique partner, read up on it, and just don't give up on your dream, because dreams do come true. Like it did for me. It took me 30 years, but dreams do come true. Carolyn?
Oh, yes. I would also say, as Kathy and Karen said too, you know, just continue to write, really. And that also what I would suggest is to research publishers that you would like to write for and look at their submission guidelines before you start writing, you know, the story that you want to write, so that you can, because it points you in the direction that you should be going as far as word length and what types of stories that they're looking for and what they won't want in a story, that kind of thing you should know. And but most of all is to just write and continue writing and keep going. Try to write as much as you can.
Jean?
Oh, I hate to be another one jumping on the same bandwagon, but yes, keep writing. That's, I think the most important thing of all is to not stop writing. That's how you learn to write better, is by writing. But reading is really important too, reading good writing so that you can compare. Picking critique partners well, pick people you can trust, and then, and this is really hard for writers, you really kind of listen to what they say and try to be as open to criticism as you can, to change what you're doing to make it better. It doesn't mean that you're being totally rejected. It means that maybe there's a better way to say or do what it is you want to say and do. And that, I found that in the beginning kind of difficult to be open that way. But when I was, I found that my writing ended up a lot better, and my story ended up better and tighter when I was listening to what others had to say. So keep writing and keep reading.
Kathy, what is the hardest part of being a writer for you?
Okay. I think finding the time. I definitely have a lot of ideas. I've written a number of short stories before I got to writing books. And my first love actually with writing was poetry. So I started with poetry, then with very short stories, and then I got into writing books, and then I wrote several and began getting published. But I think basically finding the time, and I love coming up with new ideas. I think that's basically it. It's just getting the time to write.
And I agree with Kathy too. I'm a full-time writer, and I'm a single parent and with 2 grown children, and I have a hard time finding the time to write, because it seems like 24 hours is not enough hours in the day, really, with all the other responsibilities that are going on. So for me, the hardest part about being a writer is not having the time to write. Carolyn?
What was the question again?
Sorry. What is the hardest part of being a writer?
Oh, wow. Well, I think that for me, finding the time to write and sticking to it would be, and also sometimes trusting in the idea that you want to write and just going with it, because sometimes we have a tendency to mull things over a little too long, a little too much, when we should be just getting down and get it out. Just get on with it.
Jean?
I have the time, although there are things that interfere with getting my writing done. Sometimes it's a little difficult for me to stick with one story. If I have several stories in my head, I will find that I'll start with one and I'll go, well, I'm kind of bored with that, and these other characters are really talking to me. They want me to write their story. And I feel sometimes distracted or pulled with other stories kind of yanking at me at the same time, that the story I really need to get done, the story that's on deadline, that needs to be finished and submitted. And sometimes I have a hard time getting rid of the other stories that are in my head.
Okay, well, that's the end of our question and answer. And now we're going to go, all the authors will show you their books, and we'll talk briefly about their books. But before we go to that, I just want to give a special thanks out to Secret Cravens Publishing and our publisher, Beth Walker, who has been wonderful to all of us. And it's through them that my writing has actually gotten much better, much tighter. And I'm so happy that I was given the opportunity to achieve my dream. I finally achieved my dream of being a published author. So now we're going to take it over, Kathy.
Okay, my book is Angels Among Us, and it came out last month from Secret Cravens Publishing. It's paranormal romance. Basically, it's set in Nutley, New Jersey, and basically it's about a young woman who is an artist, and she's psychic, and she meets up with her guardian angel and discovers how her parents died, so it's a little bit of a mystery about her parents' death. And also, she's recovering from hardship herself, and she's learning that she can heal from that and that she can love again, and through the help of her guardian angel. And the other book is Sacred Fires, which is set in Mexico, and it's about soulmates who are reunited. It starts off in ancient times, in ancient Mexico, and what happened to them then. And in the present times, they're brought together to solve a mystery about smuggled antiquities and some cult murders. And
Are you working on anything now?
yes, I'm writing a young adult novel, which is set in New Jersey, and it has to do with a young teenager who is a ghostbuster, and she's solving a haunting in her grandmother's shop in Ocean Grove. And I'm also planning to do a time travel I have in the works, and I have a werewolf-based story set out west.
Nice. Okay, for me, I have Roses, and it's after the sudden death of her husband, Nicky Petrino, goes into a tailspin. 3 years later, she's still grieving. Mexico seems the perfect retreat to finish her novel. Musician Drake Dente needs to get back on track, and an excursion to Mexico to work on lyrics for his comeback CD is what he needs. Can 2 ships passing in the night bound for Mexico become the love they both need and want? Attraction sizzles and misunderstandings threaten. When Mickey goes missing, can Drake find her before it's too late? This takes place in Acapulco, Mexico, and Staten Island, and this book has a lot of meaning to me because this was the last book my grandmother had read before she passed away. So that's why this book was dedicated to my grandmother. The Boardwalk totally takes place on Staten Island. After an accident at work, Brooklyn DeMelli walks every day down at the boardwalk as a way to keep active and have a semi-normal social life. She meets up with the regular morning walkers while enjoying the beauty of the beach and the scent of the ocean. To keep busy, she started her own company, making beaded jewelries for parties and flea markets. Mario Morales is the hippie that plays acoustic guitar every morning at different ends of the boardwalk. The music captivates Brooklyn. Following the muse, she meets Mario, who turns out to be a narcotics detective working undercover on a huge investigation. When Mario finds out Brooklyn is inadvertently involved in a drug trafficking ring, it leads to a series of events which puts Brooklyn's life in jeopardy while forming a romantic bond between them. So I wrote this every day. I went to the boardwalk, and as I walked, I made my little notes, and I came home and put this together. And now, what I'm working on now is the Mystical Wonders series, which takes place in Staten Island. It's women's fiction, revolves around 4 women and their relationships with each other and the men in their life. There's New Age elements in it. I have a psychic who reads tarot cards, and she can read people's minds by touching them. And then there's a romantic, and there's also a suspense with Angelo, who's the gentleman who took over my whole book. And the last book in the series that I'm in the process of writing now is these 4 women dealing with and surviving Hurricane Sandy. Because there was a lot of people, I was very lucky with Hurricane Sandy, but a lot of my friends did lose their homes, and it was very devastating. And my book will revolve, the last book in the series is going to revolve around the hurricane and how my characters deal with it while they're all looking for each other, because no one has telephones, electricity, no one can get in touch with each other. And then after I finish that, I have a 3-book series that I'm plotting out that will take place in Staten Island and I'll just give you a little snippet, it's going to take place in the sporting industry. Carolyn?
Okay. My novella is, it's an e-novella, and it's called Love in the Economy. And it's about a couple that are divorced, and because they're going through financial problems, because the husband Darren is going through financial problems, and they meet with their accountant, and he tells them that Darren really can't afford to pay for child support, a house, and his business and everything, and that he really needs to consolidate. And he really needs to come back home. and live back in the home again. So he comes back to live in the family house at a time when his ex-wife, unfortunately, is now beginning to date. So so there's a conflict there, and but they eventually work things out, and they have children. So it's a family story also involved, and so she has to choose between the new person that she's seeing and her ex-husband who was trying to win her back, and so we'll see. And that's called Love in the Economy, and it's an ebook with Secret Cravings.
And are you working on anything now?
Yes, I am. Right now, I'm kind of like 3/4 of a way done with a romantic suspense novel, which takes place in Hawaii. Actually, I guess I should have said that we talked about places. I am writing something that takes place in Hawaii, which is very glamorous and all, and it's nice doing research about that and all. And it's about an author who's at a writers' conference and stumbles upon a murder, and so a lot of action involved in that, and it's a little comedy too involved. Actually, I kind of try to throw in a little fun in there. So, and the working title is Island Surprise, but that's just a working title. I really haven't even gotten a title yet for it. So.
Jean?
I have several series of books. This series, the Now and Forever series, Now and Forever 1, A Love Story, Now and Forever 2, The Book of Danny, and Now and Forever 3, Blind Love, are all about loss and new beginnings. And actually, The Renovated Heart should have been Now and Forever 4, because it takes place in the same small town, Willow Falls, and although it doesn't, half of it revolves around Kensington State University, which these three all revolve around, the professors and so on. It also involves love and starting over. People who have had bad times, who have been divorced, who've lost spouses through death, and have to start over again. And Callie and has lost her whole family, and then her fiance in Iraq, and she comes and she is very depressed. She goes up to get her master's degree, working part-time in the administration office. She and the dean fall in love. But things are dark. This is a dark series, these three books. There are a lot, I have murders and things like that in there too. And in this book, Now and Forever Blind Love, the murderer kept getting away. I couldn't catch him. He kept faking me out as I was writing the story. But he ended up, catching himself, so to speak. And that was kind of the most fun part about the book, was catching Rex. Danny is a Iraq war vet who has post-traumatic stress and comes to teach at Kensington State and has to learn how to have a normal life. And it's his journey, which is a dark one, through a difficult past with parents who are in jail and so on, and how to leave that behind and start again and become part of a community and turn the life from the dark side to a light side. This was a really traumatic book. It's written from a male point of view, which was unusual for me, but the character was so real. It was like he was sitting on my shoulder and telling me his story, and I absolutely had to write it. And this story about the handsome man and the temporarily blind woman, also about people who have suffered loss and who come together and find each other, as well as it has an older romance involved too, where the young man's father, who is a widower, meets a woman. He's 63 and she's 60, and they too have a romance. And so there are 3 romances involved in this book. 2 in this one, The Renovated Heart, which I just love the title, about people who have had loss, of a woman who was left. And then, of course, the new man is interested in her, and she doesn't know how to deal with that. So she invents a marriage that doesn't exist anymore, and then she kind of paints herself into a corner with that when she finds herself very attracted to the man who's renovating the house that she's renting. And this one is a military romance that I wrote with a retired Marine, Ben Tanner, which was a lot of fun. We wrote it over the internet, and there are some very exciting military scenes in here which are completely real, written by Ben. But it is a romance where a Marine meets a journalist by accident on a plane, and from there the story takes off. And my current series is Hollywood Hearts. I'm working on the 4th book in that series now, first being If I Loved You, and the second being Red Carpet Romance, which just came out about 2 weeks ago.
Well, Kathy, why don't you tell us why do you write?
Okay, I guess, growing up, I just remember that I kept a diary as a teenager. I wrote poetry, and I always loved writing in school. I enjoyed writing stories, writing even essays, and I just find it's something that just comes natural to me. I have to work on it, but I feel it just comes natural, and I enjoy making up stories, and I found it entertaining as a child. I find it entertaining, and I enjoy it when readers let me know they've been entertained, so I have fun with it.
Well, when I started writing, I was, believe it or not, I was very quiet when I was, younger, and I would sit and write all my ideas down. I kept a journal, a diary, had the little key, the whole 9 yards going, but I use my writing as a therapy. Whenever I'm writing, I feel like I'm more in peace with myself. My inner self is calm, and writing has just always been a part of my life. I mean, since I was 14 years old, I couldn't see myself doing anything but writing. I started out writing poetry. I worked as a journalist at the Staten Island Register, where I did some investigative stories, some human interest stories, which was really very interesting. Get your adrenaline going. I remember jumping into a dumpster to get some information at one point. So when you actually, to answer the question, why do I write? Because I love it. It's who I am and who I will always be. Carolyn?
Okay. Well, I also, as Kathy and Karen said, started at a very young age writing, and I think probably writing grew for me out of reading, actually, out of just loving to read stories. When I was a child, I always was reading something. So then I just got into writing as well, and I always kept a journal when I was like in junior high school and high school as well. Like Kathy said, a diary. I had a journal I would write in, and I also then I majored in journalism when I went to college, and I was very involved in the student magazine and the newspaper there, and then just transferred on. And as I've always been involved in some aspect of writing, but I really loved fiction writing most of all.
Jean?
My cousin tells me that I was making up stories when I was 7, and she would come over and we would play, and she would say, where does she come up with this stuff? So storytelling was always a way that I used to keep myself entertained. I would write some down, I would make them up as I went along. Even on a long car trip when we would drive by, I would look out the window at a house and who lives there and what is their life like, and do they have children, do they have a dog, and it just, so the world was kind of an endless place of stories for me. And I did start writing when I was in elementary school and more so in high school, but I started off with nonfiction was my first introduction to writing. I started writing articles for parenting newspapers, and I still do write a movie review column called Movie Choices for Kids, which keeps me writing every week, and that's been syndicated for 12 years. But writing parenting articles, and then my first book was a nonfiction book called Beyond the Bake Sale, the Ultimate School Fundraising book, and then I decided that the only way for me really to go was my first love, which was fiction, and that is just, there isn't anything else I would do. If somebody said you could write tomorrow, what would you be doing? I said I would be on the beach writing stories in the sand with my finger. There would just be, there's nothing else that I would rather do.
Okay. Well, Jean, besides doing all these books, is also the head of marketing at Secret Cravings.
Yes, I am.
And maybe you can give us a few tips on marketing?
For authors, I think it's really important to get your work out there. So one good way, free way to do it is to have a blog. That's also a good way to become a writer, and if you force yourself to put something new on that blog at least 2 or 3 times a week, you will be writing 2 or 3 times a week. It doesn't matter if what you're writing is fiction, is nonfiction, it should be writing. You can just say, oh, all the things that I love that are the color red, and write about the color red. The topic isn't important, but that's a great way to keep writing, and then people will come and read what you write, and you'll find that if you're doing well, that people will come week after week, and you will develop a following. So if you're writing a book, that's a very good way to get started by doing a blog, and you can, of course, like we do, some of us, called Tuesday Tales, where people get together and we blog, and we hop between people's blogs or among people's blogs. From blog to blog, sharing our writing with each other and the rest of the world, and that's a good way to partner with someone else on a blog and get your work and their work out there at the same time.
And I think social media, too, has a lot to do with promoting and marketing your work.
Yes, you need to have a presence on social media for sure. A website, I think, is also essential. But being on Facebook and interacting with people, chatting, not just screaming by my book, but talking to people. What are you doing today? This is what I'm doing today. And when I get home, I will come tell everybody, my Facebook friends, wow, we did the TV today, and it was really exciting, and it was really fun. And then I will ask people, and what did you do today? And I will respond to that. I think people need to know who you are more so than before there were ebooks or social media, when authors were just mysterious, figures somewhere. The more real you become to your readers, the more likely they are to try your books.
And that's network, and that's why it's very important to network, visit your local library, go back to your old high school and college, and, not that you're out there trying to sell them your book, just that you're out there letting them know, hey, I came here, I got my bachelor's degree, and I'm using my degree to finally, be in a career that I really, want to be in.
Right, exactly, exactly. There's so many different ways to reach out into the world to get people to know you, but by doing things for other people, you would be amazed at how that comes back to you, where people then get curious about the kind of person you are, and when they find out you're a writer, then they get curious about your books.
Okay, I think that just about wraps it up now. I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank Kathy Green-Fetter for coming here today, Carolyn Gibbs, Jean Jochum for being here. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm hoping that through our stories and our inspiration that it will help you to sit down, write, get your book out. Also, you will see at the end that we have our blogs, so you can come visit our blogs, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of us, and we will be more than happy to answer any questions. We're always here to help aspiring writers and organizations, and come and speak to high schools and grammar schools, in our immediate areas. So thank you very much, and God bless you.